Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Everyone. Glad to see you here. I'm VP Franklin, and I am an emeritus professor from the University of California at Riverside, now located at the University of New Orleans because I've been the editor of the Journal of African American History for a number of years. And when I retired from Riverside, I moved the journal to UNO because I was returning to New Orleans when I retired because I had to leave. I had been teaching at Dillard, and so I had to find another position when the departments, certain departments closed down. So I'm here, and so I've been here in New Orleans for quite a while and working with various people on different aspects of the civil rights movement because I had been working on children and the civil rights movement with my students out at Riverside. And so since I got back here in New Orleans, I've been working with people on children in the civil rights movement in Louisiana and in New Orleans. And these two wonderful people participated in a panel discussion at the exhibit that the students did at Xavier on children in the civil rights movement in Louisiana, and that was back in February of this year. We're still at 18. That was back in February, right? And so I've been working on that topic first with my students in Riverside, and then here with faculty at Xavier, and Cerisi Ogutunji and Charlene DeClear, two faculty members, and it was their students that did the research on children and teenagers and their contributions to the civil rights movement in various, well, they did 4 places. We did Baton Rouge, Shreveport, Bogalusa, and New Orleans. Those were the 4 places, and my 2 colleagues here, they participated in that opening of that exhibit back in February, and we're going to, I think it's going to be up again for Black History Month at Trinity School. But I've been working on this, and one of the interesting things about children and the civil rights movement is that I first noticed that we need to be paying attention to what children and teenagers are doing from working on my book, The Chronology of the Civil Rights Movement. My Soul was a Witness in the chronology, and while I was working on this, there's a trick question. There's a trick question that I always ask my students and stuff. I say, okay, so there are 4 civil rights organizations, and NAACP, SCLC, CORE, and SNCC, okay? And at the March on Washington, the leaders of the civil rights movement spoke, of these 4 organizations spoke, except one. Except one. One was not there. Of the major civil rights leaders, was not there. So I was doing my research on this, it's not there. And while I was doing my research, I had, we summarized articles on, articles on civil rights activities around the country. And the article in the New York Times on the 20th of August, 1963 said, this is from the New York Times, I think it says, Plaquemine, Louisiana. Groups of Black adults and children, including CORE director James Farmer, was arrested and jailed for participating in anti-segregation demonstrations. A federal judge signed an injunction prohibiting further demonstrations. So that's a summary of that article. And so James Farmer, the leader of CORE, was not at the March on Washington because he was in jail in Plaquemine, Louisiana, with children. Children were in the jail.
Can I say something about that?
Yes. This, of course, this is Dodie's list.
Dodie, can I give just a second?
Yes.
So just a couple intros to say.
Oh, okay.
VP just gave half my introduction.
Oh.
Sure. So, my name is Christopher Harder. I'm the Deputy Director here at the Amistad Research Center, and much like VP, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today. When we asked VP to think about some individuals that he could bring together for a conversation, The two individuals, Dr. Raphael, Cassimere, Dodie, Smith-Simmons, are two wonderful examples of the type of young people's engagement that VP is talking about with their work with CORE and the NAACP Youth Council. And I think that this topic not only gives us an opportunity to look back at history in connection with the current exhibition we have on the New Orleans Civil Rights Movement, but it's certainly fitting with what's going on today with young people's activism and what's going on in the United States today. So I briefly just want to give a brief introduction. EP had introduced himself, a wonderful scholar on African American history, African American education, and the Civil Rights Movement. But we're also joined by Dr. Raphael Cassimere, who's a native of New Orleans and a product of its public school systems. He received his bachelor and master's degree in history at the University of New Orleans and his PhD at Lehigh, which he's showing his Lehigh colors and support today. And he was a full-time member of the UNO History Department from 1971 to 2007, when he retired with the rank of the Serafia D. Elda University Teaching Professor. And in 2015, the Louisiana Board of Regents for Higher Education created the Raphael Cassimere Jr. Endowed Professorship in African American History. And as I said, he was very active and continues to be active in the NAACP. And then also Dodie Smith-Simmons, who many of you know, was born in Mississippi, but her family moved to Louisiana and settled in New Orleans, where she became a socially conscious youth and joined her older sister in the civil rights organizations. She was active in the New Orleans Congress of Racial Equality and participated in sit-ins, demonstrations, and for her activities was jailed more than once for her activities. She now continues her commitment to social and political change by engaging the public in forums about the civil rights movement and activities. And finally, yes?
I was also a member of the NAACP Youth Council. Raphael Cassimere was the chairperson. So I was first a member of NAACP Youth Council, and from there went to CORE. So I like, to acknowledge that I started out with the Youth Council of the NAACP.
And you also went to Joseph S. Clark High School.
Yeah, we went to Clark together.
Well, a lot of activists.
Yeah.
Jerome.
Before we get started, I would like to thank a couple sponsors. This event is being sponsored by the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities and Union Pacific Railroad. Their support has made this event possible. And so we'd like to thank everyone for coming out, and I'll turn it back over to VP so we can get started.
Yeah, well, as I was mentioning, that we had the exhibit in Louisiana earlier this year, back in February, and Dr. Cassimere and Dodie Smith mentioned that they were teenagers. That they were teenagers
Yes.
when they were engaged in their civil rights activism here in New Orleans. And what I'm finding, what my students are finding, and what the students at Xavier uncovered, were that students played outside role in civil rights protests throughout the country. And we have, and I'm saying students, I'm saying high school and
Elementary schools.
right,
Yes.
high school and below. We think of the Children's March in Birmingham. Okay, so that's the most vivid example. Well, one of the most vivid examples. The other, of course, is all Ruby Bridges here in New Orleans, a child, and then there were other children who were profiled at various points in time who were engaged in desegregating schools. But once we began doing the research, we began to find more and more students involved in, and I'm talking high school students and children, elementary school students involved. And both of our illustrious speakers here today were children when they began their activism. Okay, and so the first question, of course, the natural question is, why did you become active as a teenager at such a young age?
Well, as you say, I'm from Mississippi. My father and mother were also from Mississippi. And when they stopped blacks from growing cotton, they could not sell their cotton, only whites could. My parents had no other source of income, so they moved. I had an aunt and uncle who lived here. My dad came down in search of employment, found employment, moved us here. I was 2.5 years old then. And he always had a saying when we asked questions, why can't we do this? Why can't we go there? He said, well, if you want something done, do it yourself. Don Hubbard would always ask his mother, why can't I sit on the front seat on the bus? And her response to him was, they're waiting for you. We didn't understand what our parents meant until we got older. I was 15 when I joined the NAACP Youth Council, following my older sister Dodie, who's a year and a few months older than I am. She was in Raphael's class at Clark, and most of the students who wanted to desegregate LSUNO was from Clark. So I graduated in 1960 from Harbor High School.
Clark East. Clark East.
Clark East, yeah. It really was because most of the students were from Clark. When we went to Clark, I went on the platoon system. And that meant half the kids went to school during the morning, the other half went during the afternoon.
Wow.
And when Dorothy got involved in the NAACP Youth Council, I thought, oh, we didn't go any place. We didn't go out of the neighborhood when we were kids. So I thought that was a way of getting out of the house. So I joined the NAACP Youth Council. And while at a meeting, we met at Reverend Burrell's church on Dumaine and Galvez. And I think this was back in October. 2 young men came to the NAACP Youth Council. It was Rudy Lombard and Jerome Smith. And they had just started picketing and sitting in at Woolworths and McCrory's on Canal Street. And they had come to ask the NAACP Youth Council to help them with their picketing and sit-in. So we did. Well, I liked what they were doing, so I left the NAACP and joined CORE. And just sit in, set up in at the lunch counter. We developed a tactic called hit and run, where we would have the white CORE member go to the lunch counter and order the food, and when the food came up, the black member would go and eat. Immediately the dishes would crash to the floor, and silly stuff. But it even made the cover of either Look magazine or Light magazine. Ed Myers and Sissy, oh, what was her name? She was also a freedom rider. And her mother was the editor of the Atlanta Constitution newspaper. And I guess being young, I was 15 years old, and I thought that was fun. You know, when you're young, you're naive.
Right.
And you're not afraid. But other things happened. We did the sit-in, and in '61 came the Freedom Ride. I was a trainer. I wanted to go on the ride, but Doratha at the time, she wasn't hailing. Also a student from Clark, a few years older than I was, said, you're going to be a trainer. I thought, I don't want to be no trainer. But what we did, people, after the initial ride that started on May 4th, and when the riders got beaten, in Birmingham and the bus bombed in Anniston, Alabama. 3 Thompson sisters, 2 of them also, 3 of them were all members of the NAACP Council too.
And Clark.
Yeah, and Shirley was still in high school.
Right.
Alice and Jean
Hey,
were
graduated.
at El Camino. And one of the Thompson sisters called and say, meet at Freedom House. That was at 917 North 20, Doratha's parents' house. And people today give all the credit for the continuation of the rides to the Nashville student group led by Diane Nash. But nobody knew that we had meant to continue the ride. We were younger and we were ready for action. Doratha had the sense to know that we weren't going anywhere because CORE was a small group. People think we was a large organization because anywhere you went in the South, there were people from New Orleans CORE. Doratha say, you're not going anywhere. We have injured people we have to seek medical help for. We have to find housing for them. We have to feed them. We have to organize carpool to get them places to live. And speaking of Xavier, part of the group stayed at Xavier at St. Mike's Hall.
Right.
And
Yeah, Norman Francis was the dean, and he
yes,
agreed.
yeah, he was not the dean then.
Yeah, he did.
Oh no, he was not the president.
Right. He was the dean, and he tells a story about he went to the president, you know what I'm saying? And and she said, so
And
like,
some-
it's your decision. You know, you have to decide.
Some of the people who were beaten and flown to New Orleans stayed on campus at Xavier. Others stayed in private homes. Some stayed at Freedom House. Some stayed at Neil Douglas' house and Lotus Eli and Bob Collins, who were the core lawyers. And so we were not able to go and pick it up. Thank God there was somebody to do it. But we always hear that James Former was afraid to, he was not. When he said to Diane Nash, young lady, do you know what you're getting yourself into? He spoke to us like that because he wanted to make sure that there's a chance that if you went on somebody's campaign, you would not come back alive. He wanted to be sure that she understood that. We had no idea that it would take off like it did. So that's when I became a trainer.
I'm gonna hold off because I wanted us to pick up the NAACP
Yes.
Youth Council story, you know, to get it up to this point,
Right.
up to the point where you are, and so you were the president.
Right. But I want to make a quick observation. I'm looking at the audience, and it reminded me when I went back to Lehigh, I think in 1995, and they had just created this huge African Studies program. And the director explained that there were no blacks in it. That most of the blacks who came there were interested in business or engineering, whereas the people who were taking the courses were whites who were curious about the movement and what had happened. So I'm not surprised about who's here today. I'm glad to see you. I was born in New Orleans. In fact, one of the things that happened while we were doing the tricentennial celebration, I knew, but it didn't dawn on me, that my family has been here 75% of the time that the city has been in existence. My family has been here continuously since 1793, which is 225 years. So we were here, and when did I become sensitized to the movement? I'm not quite sure, because I think it's an individual thing. I remember one of the ladies who I met in the NAACP, who started off as a Garveyite and then became a member of the NAACP. She said, I first became involved in civil rights when I was 4 years old. She said, a white lady called me a nigger, and I threatened to hit her in the head with a garbage can. So I guess this kind of individual things. I got started fairly early protesting against the signs on the bus that Dodie was talking about. I remember that I was a freshman in high school, and I was sitting behind the screen, and it bothered me, the little screen that said for colored patrons only. It's bad enough that we had to sit behind it, the fact that we had to read it. So I started making my own little protest by turning the screen around so I didn't have to read it. And one day when I was coming from school, opposite the Lafitte Project, Orleans Avenue, an old white man demanded that I turn the screen around. And of course, at that particular time, blacks usually complied with demandings. I didn't. And coincidentally, 2 white policemen got on the bus. The City Park bus at that time. They were looking for somebody, and he threatened to have me arrested. He didn't. They went to the back, they removed the guy off, and after they got off the bus, and he cursed me out, and he turned the screen around himself. And to me, that was my first little civil rights victory. I was 13 years old. It wasn't part of any group, it was just an individual protest that I had made. And of course, there were people who then, since asked me, what would you have done if the police had told you to turn around? I don't know what I would have done. Knowing how bad the police were and the reputation they had with blacks, I don't know. Thank God I didn't have to find out. But in any case, I remember when they took the screens off the bus, it was during my junior year at Clark, the very day of the high school.
What year was
That was 1958.
50?
May 31st, 1958. I remember because the seniors graduated, and I got right behind the driver. And the thing that really kind of disturbed me was, it wasn't just there weren't many blacks on the bus. I mean, there weren't many whites on the bus. But some of the blacks were kind of irate. You don't have to be pushy, you know, the fact that you have the right, you don't have to do it this quickly. So I found out there were some people who were hesitant about using rights that we had. And I remember a few years ago, maybe about 20 years ago, I was in the supermarket behind 2 older blacks, and they were reminiscing about the good old days. You know, they treated us better than we do at the back of the bus. And I thought, I must have been on the wrong bus all the I didn't remember. But anyway, I got started in NAACP Youth Council when I was a freshman at LSU. I was invited. I did not intend to go. I told the person who invited me that I would go. But we happened to meet up at the library on Loyola. That's where a lot of the students from UNO would interact. And he walked me to the meeting. We walked from the library to AP Turo's office on Orleans Avenue. And I saw a lot of people from UNO there, and I got elected vice president. I wasn't even a member. Paid my dues next week. I got elected vice president, got actively involved, and actually it wasn't October of 1960, it was August of 1960, because when Rudy Lombard, who was the president of the Corps at that particular time, came to the meeting and asked us to participate in the first sit-in, which was September 17, 1960. Corps provided the sit-in activists, and the NAACP Youth Council picketed. Now that was a pretty handy stuff. I didn't tell my parents, because I knew what mother would have said. Didn't say anything, but went out there, and we picketed, and somebody saw us, and my mother found out about it, and she was at one time she was proud, and at the same time she was afraid that we were involved. And from that point on, I got elected president, and we got involved not just in sit-ins and picketing, but voter registration classes. One thing I found out that older blacks really wanted to learn how to register to vote. That was more important to them than sitting in the front of the bus eating at the lunch counter. A lot of them wanted to learn how to register to vote. It was so difficult because of the roadblocks, the testing. You had to pass the test. And of course, if you failed one part of the test, you could not go back for 30 days. So we got involved in all kinds of things. And as Dodie mentioned, it was fun because, you know, when you're young, you don't think about getting killed. No. It's not so bad. And I think about it, this time we were going to somewhere, I guess we were going to Chicago, an NAACP convention. It was all NAACP youth members. I was old, I was about 20. And I think the youngest was 15. You remember Val Ferdinand? And we stopped in Brookhaven, Mississippi. And they didn't treat us too well. And we were outraged. And he called the NAACP office in Jackson. And Charlie Evans had just taken over. His brother had just been killed 6 weeks earlier. And I remember that because I was on the program called about 2 years ago. And when we called, and he said, "Do you know that tree in Mississippi?" So he wasn't very sympathetic. So anyway, we got involved, and there were a lot of us who were active there. I think there were 11 of us who actually, 11 couples actually got married. That's where I met my wife, and the NAACP Youth Council. I want to say this before we go any further. The younger you are, probably the braver you are.
Yes.
And the bravest people were the women. Not always the smartest, but they were the bravest because they secretly were never afraid of anything. Because I was the president and I was responsible for other people, I was often apprehensive.
You mentioned that you were training, that you were, they wanted you to do the training.
Well, let me explain what a trainer did. CORE was a nonviolent direct action group. You didn't fight back. Somebody cuss you out, you just sat still and listen. So people who came down to go on a ride, there was over 400 people to go to jail in Jackson. 40% of the people that went to jail in Jackson were either CORE members or trained by New Orleans CORE people. We had to train them in the nonviolent direct action techniques, and that's what we did. We treated them like they would be treated if they got to Mississippi and was attacked. We slapped them, we cussed them, we threw them out to sea. If they could not adhere to that, you pack your bag and go back to where you came from. But nobody that I knew of in New Orleans went back. They all went to Jackson and went to jail. The way I became a freedom rider is after the passage of the ICC ruling outlawing segregation on buses, terminals, restrooms, rest stops, and so forth. So we decided that we would do testing. I tested throughout Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Texas. The first one we did was right here in New Orleans at the Trailway Station. I came straight from Suno because when we went on these campaigns, you had to dress like you were going to church. Well, I had a PE class and I showed up in sneakers and socks. Doratha gave me a look. She didn't have to say anything, but I say it was either I was poor. I was so poor I couldn't afford the other OR and poor. So it was either take my 7-cent bus fare and come up for the sit-in or go home and not participate. So I chose to come up and participate, knowing that we wouldn't get served. I went because I didn't have any money. I figured we would either go to jail, and lo and behold, they served us. And I thought, you're going to jail anyway because you ain't got no money. But Doratha had the money, and there was a couple of us that didn't have the money. She paid for us. And that was the first one. Then we went to, we were going to Mobile, Alabama. So we went through, and we always had a pad. Was the sign up in the bus? Was the sign up in the terminal? I tried to use the restroom, went to the lunch counter. Most of the places we were not served. Well, Jerome Smith had just and George Raymond had just gotten out of jail in Mississippi during their 40 days. Nick was working in Macomb, and they decided to leave because Macomb was a stronghold of the Ku Klux Klan, and they thought it was too dangerous. And Jerome said, we gotta go to Macomb. And we said, okay. So we went, and We got there, the bus terminal was closed down, said it was a gas leak. So we went into the African American section of this Macomb to a hotel and cafe called the White Castle Hotel and Cafe. And stayed there. About noon, we went back. When we got there, there was not one policeman in sight. When we went on these rides, we had testers and observers. Jerome was the observer. It's like he did not sit with us. He sat apart. He got off the bus first and went to go into the terminal. And there was an elderly white man pushing the doors trying to keep him out. When some white people tried to come out, he had to move, and that's how Jerome got in. And the man left. Then we went in. Jerome went up to the ticket counter to purchase our return tickets. And we went to sat at the lunch counter. And George Raymond said to the waitress, "May I have a cup of coffee, please?" The manager came out, ranting and raving, "Greyhound does not own this terminal. Please leave." George again said, "May I have a cup of coffee, please?" This young white Macomb, Mississippi citizen got up, went over to the coffee maker, poured a cup of coffee, and walked behind George Raymond, poured the hot coffee over his head and hit him in the base of the neck with the cup. At this point, Jerome signaled for Alice and I to go sit in the waiting room. By him doing that, they saw that he was part of the group, and all hell broke loose. They started beating Jerome. And I think if it was not for George Raymond stepping in to take some of the hits that was meant for Jerome, Jerome would have died that day. Because they were beating him, "Kill a nigger, kill a nigger." And I was sitting there, I'm writing what was going on and singing in my head, "We are not afraid," and writing what was going on. And I still had that. And Tom Valentine was a little guy. They took him off the stool and threw him to the ground. He bounced up. George Raymond was running around, and he would run over and get in the middle of a hit with Jerome. And when they finally kicked us all out, we were running. I never knew it was Captain Chew. I saw recently this film that Civil Memorial did on A House Divided. And I said, "Oh, there's me. It's me and Jerome running." And we didn't stand there because they would have killed us had we just stood. Alec Gifford, who was the news commentator on Channel 6, was there. There were FBI agents in the room. They didn't do anything.
They were observant too.
And when Jerome was in front of me, and a truck drove by, driven by an African American, and Jerome dove into the back of the truck. And I went, I didn't know what to do. So I ran, and I ran around the bus terminal was located on Canal Street in Macomb. And there was when we got there, we never saw one black person. But when I ran around the corner, that's where, around the corner was where the color entrance was. The color folks just surrounded me. And I thank these people, I don't know their name, but I thank them every day, because I don't think I would have been alive. So I say to myself, calm yourself down, walk out of this crowd like you're going to clean Miss Ann's kitchen, and when you get out of sight, run like hell. Never been to Macomb in my life. Didn't realize that I was in a white neighborhood. So that's what I did. I walked up the hill, looking back to see. When I didn't see anybody, I started running. And I heard, "Dodie!" How these white folks know my name? And I ran past, the adrenaline had kicked in. and I heard my name again, and I ran even fast. I had heels on. And I didn't know I could run so fast. And the truck overtook me, and Jerome got out. And was I happy? So we went back over to the White Castle Hotel and Cafe. They called in a Dr. James Anderson to take care of us. When he finished taking care of Jerome, Jerome came up to me and said, "Get Bobby Kennedy on the phone." And I'm looking at him, man, you had too many hits. And he said it again, and I'm looking at him. Then he started calling out numbers. And I wrote down Bobby Kennedy's direct line. So I called him, and expecting to have a secretary answer the phone. So when this man answered the phone, I said, "Hello, may I speak to Attorney General Bobby Kennedy?" He said, "This is he." And I said, "My name is Doratha Smith. I'm calling for Jerome Smith." He said, "I'm aware of the situation. There are FBI agents out front waiting to take you back to New Orleans." Being all of 18 and a half, I said, "Oh, no, they won't. We going back to New Orleans the way we came, by bus." And I handed the phone to Jerome. And he said the same thing, because I heard Jerome say what, Bobby Kennedy told him about the FBI agent. Because I thought, are these FBI agents from Mississippi? Ain't no way. And when we went back the second time, the mob had doubled. There were policemen, but we were not willing to get another beating. So we had the taxi driver to take us to the highway, and we held the bus down, and that's how we got back to New Orleans.
What part of Mississippi was your family from?
My dad is from Lexington, Mississippi, in Holmes County,
Okay.
and my mom is from Benton, Mississippi.
Well, Lexington
in
is close to
Yazoo County.
Tennessee, isn't it?
Huh?
Is Lexington close to Tennessee? That's close to Tennessee, I'm saying. Lexington?
Lexington is closer to, I was just there. I don't really know, because like I say, I spent
Right.
most of my time here.
Right.
When I was little, we used to go back for the summer. But Mississippi has gotten better. I look at all of the things that they have accomplished that we have yet to accomplish here in New Orleans. But a lot that happened, because when you talked about James Farmer being in jail and not on the March on Washington, well, he had got, the night that they beat the kids, they had to sneak Farmer and Lolis Eli out in a hearse.
In a hearse, right. That's it.
And the way he got back to Plaquemines to be arrested, they put a warrant out for his arrest.
Right.
And he said he's gonna turn his stuff, we call him Uncle Jim. And we said, "Uncle Jim, please don't go back, they're gonna kill you." And I went to the March on Washington, and I kept thinking, we didn't have cell phones like we have today. Is he dead or is he alive? Because we knew once he turned himself in, he would be killed. To speak about the people in CORE, I think they were some of the bravest people in the movement.
And they were young people. See, that's what
Yes.
what we're trying. What
Well,
I've been
people
trying to do
Would
is
not have had that kind of courage because of past experience.
Yeah,
Right.
see,
And this is
we
what
were
I-
young, and because we were young, we were not afraid. We didn't realize what could have happened to us.
Right.
Because I realized that the day I was running, that I'm going to die in Macomb today. And I say, better I do, because when I get home, my sister Doratha's going to kill me. And let me tell you why I say that. Doratha was a great seamstress. She had made this blue wool skirt, bought this beautiful white sweater, bought some pearls to go with it. And because we had to go dress on these campaigns, I didn't like to iron. We were leaving early. Doratha's father, Johnny B., who one of his jobs was as a cab driver, came to pick me up early that morning. So I put on her outfit.
Without telling her.
No, she was still asleep. So I thought, you know, better they kill me in Macomb. But she later gave me the outfit.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, what I want to do is that we can have a conversation so that we can have some questions and from anybody here, because we want you to participate. If you have
Jump in.
Just yes.
What did you mean when you said they're doing things in Mississippi that we're not doing
No, can you
here?
speak a little louder?
What did you mean when you said they are doing things in Mississippi that come a long way that we don't have here?
Well, when you go, there are more business people, there are more people in government in Mississippi. If you knew Mississippi, like I knew Mississippi in the older days, so much has changed. They still have a long ways to go, but so much have changed here. I don't see the activities here that happens in Mississippi now.
And I want to piggyback on that.
Okay.
I'm going to piggyback on that because this is an opening for me.
Go ahead.
Because the journal's special issue on the tricentennial African American experience is going to be published, and Connie Atkinson and Molly Mitchell at the Midlow Center at the University of New Orleans were the guest editors for that special issue, and it'll be coming out shortly as done. But one of the things, it's the issues on New Orleans, and I don't have a copy of the table of contents here.
Well, we can pass them out.
Yeah, she has it, and that's coming. So and there's going to be some kind of opening event at UNO too for the Midlow Center there and stuff. But I made sure that in this special issue on New Orleans, on the tricentennial of New Orleans, there is a special report in this special issue that you will get to read if you get a copy of the special report. The title of the special report is, so this is piggyback right over what you just said, The Prison to College Pipeline Program, an ethical education-based response to mass incarceration in Mississippi. Mississippi, so the special report describes how the University of Mississippi decided that they were going to start working with Parchment Prison. Their faculty members are going to be offering courses there. They're going to the inmates who take courses in the program get credit at the University of Mississippi, and then 4 other schools decided that they would join into this program in Mississippi. And I'm talking about Mississippi State and other universities and stuff. And so they have programs, not just in Parchment, but they also have it in the women's program, and it's discussed in this special report, in the issue on the New Orleans tricentennial. Because I want to let them know that in terms of, in this area, Mississippi is ahead of Louisiana.
Yes.
You know, and so that will be that report is in there with photos, etc., of these inmates who took or taken the classes, graduated from the classes, went on to take courses at Mississippi, at various Mississippi colleges, because there are 5 colleges that are participating in this program.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. New Orleans always had attitude, at least we're not in Mississippi.
Yeah.
It's pretty low benchmark. But I remember a state meeting at the NAACP. Somebody came from Faraday and called for help. I never heard of Faraday, let alone been there. And one of the older men would say, well, Mr. Douglas, if we go to Faraday, we got to go and get out before dark. Now, I kind of got suspicious when I found out we had to go through Natchez, Mississippi to get to Faraday, Louisiana. And we had the meeting, and they burned down the meeting place that night. That was really claim country at that particular time. But as Dodie mentioned, Mississippi has moved ahead in many respects from what we have here in Louisiana. And I think part of the reason is because they were much more together during the civil rights movement. They knew that they were being victimized and they were oppressed. And they worked a little bit harder than some places here. But I just want to mention one of the things. The NAACP also believed in nonviolent, but we took the position is nonviolent means you got the first hit. The second hit was coming from us. That we didn't give you license. Now you mentioned you didn't know anybody. I know somebody who did come to one of your meetings where you were teaching nonviolence. My boy, he talks about that all the time. He didn't go back. he could not take that.
Go ahead.
I remember I was speaking on Canal Street by myself. I was president, so I always had to be there. And this white guy hit me so hard I could still feel the punch, you know. I didn't think white boys could get that hard. I broke my sign over his head and then went to get a policeman. Took his sign. By the time he got there, the guy was gone. And all of the blacks around there were telling me what I should have done. Nobody came to my rescue. Then my little vice president who came, I think at that particular time, I weighed about 160 and my vice president weighed about 135. I wish I had been here. I said, I wish you had been here too. But I'm saying, we believe that we needed to defend ourselves. I mean, you mentioned that if you didn't resist, you might get killed.
Yeah.
At that particular time, I wasn't willing to get killed.
I would like to make mention, the photograph you saw of me upstairs and Jerome, well, it was taken by a young white Newcomb student, Connie Bradford, I forget her married name. But Connie's both family, well, her mother and father, were good friends with Bull Connors. Connie said she first came to the core meeting to give us a piece of her mind. And when she sat and listened, we changed her mind and she joins core.
We changed something.
And when her family found out, they tried to get her to get out of core. She wouldn't. And they would threaten to put her in a mental institute. And Reverend Abernathy of SCLC went and got her and took her to Ohio or somewhere because her parents were going to commit her because she was involved in another young person.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to ask, and I think that Dr. Cassimere addressed it a little bit about the Mississippi thing. I think surprised us all, but I'm from Central Louisiana, so I know about Faraday and I know all that, and I grew up in a really scary kind of place. But relative to the state of Louisiana, would you still say the same thing about Mississippi, or instead of just New Orleans? I mean, do you feel like New Orleans has come further than the state as a whole? I mean, I hope.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so
yes.
when we say better than New Orleans, I just think better than the state of Louisiana.
Yes.
State.
But not necessarily better than New Orleans.
Registration.
Yeah.
Core started in 1963 in Plaquemine, Louisiana.
Yeah.
And that was so horrible. And like I say, elementary school kids, high school kids were jailed. They were policemen on horses rode through the crowd, putting cattle prods to the children. I was old, I was 15, 16. And, but these were really young kids who really had no understanding of what was happening. But we worked throughout Louisiana, and some part of Louisiana was worse than Mississippi.
Oh, absolutely.
And speaking of Mississippi and New Orleans Core, the 3 civil rights workers who were killed, Lena Horn knew a car dealership friend, and she and Lorraine Hansberry were instrumental in getting a deal on 2 cars to be sent to Mississippi. One of the cars was the car that was the 3 civil rights workers was killed in. The keys was handed over to Jerome Smith, who could not drive, who called with Don Hubbard to come up from New Orleans. Don went up to New York, drove the car back, turned it over to Matt Suarez, who delivered it to Mississippi, and turned it over to George Raymond, also of New Orleans. There was a rule. If the car broke down or if you're going to be late, you called and checked in. When Don heard, White told him that the 3 guys were missing, automatically he knew they were dead. Same with Fluky. Had not the car been filled with core stuff, Fluky had to get out and stay in Ohio. Andy Goodman came down in that car and was one of the people killed the first day on the job. Let's just say, you know, New Orleans people were all over the place. When they did Freedom Highway,
North Carolina.
Gene and Shirley Thompson, Pat Smith, Thomas Valentine, all of New Orleans was a part of that. Jerome was the project director. And like I say, you know.
That was McKissick's, wasn't it? That was Floyd McKissick's deal in
Yeah,
North Carolina.
North Carolina, yeah.
Right, well, the core was in specific places, and then went
Yeah.
out to, and then serviced various other,
But we were
various
all, New Orleans Corps
campaigns.
was always called on by the national office. Send somebody here, send somebody there. That's why when in '64, Doratha left Corps as chairman of New Orleans Corps to be a field secretary in northern Louisiana, working out of Monroe. And I became chairman. And at the time, we were working on for the registration for the education. There were 2 field secretaries working here, Mary Lovelace and Mary Hamilton.
Miss Mary.
And Miss Mary, call me Miss.
Yeah.
And
Is she still living?
no, she's dead. And I was always being pulled this way and that way. Mary Hamilton say, oh, you gotta get more membership for New Orleans Corps.
Yeah.
Mary Lovelace say, you gotta get the community involved. And that's what I thought was more important. Involve the community. And I worked mostly the night ward because that's where I live.
Yeah.
And I would like to say this. If you look, most of the civil rights activists came from the Ninth Ward. And I always, there was a saying, I'm from the Big Nine and don't mind dying. And I thought about that several years ago. And I thought about all the people who were from the Ninth Ward. You know, from the kids who desegregated school, from yourself, the Thompson sisters, Ferdinand, you name it, and the Ninth Ward people just was there. And so I finally closed down New Orleans chapter of Corps because there wasn't many members, because all the members was taken and hired by National Corps and sent out all over to work.
Tell them what you were being paid.
I beg your pardon?
Tell them what you were being paid, because I got hired by...
Oh, when I got hired by Corps, I got $22.50 every 2 weeks if the check came. And that wasn't too many times. But, you know, we were dedicated and the money didn't matter. Because my parents did that, I knew I was going to get something to eat every day. And at the time that I was on payroll, I was living behind the castle, 917 and a half North
You
Tonti.
didn't mention Doris. She didn't get as much notoriety as a sister, but she was probably more active outside of New Orleans.
Yes.
Doris Castle.
Yes, she was. And, but I always admire Doratha. When my first time going to jail was 1961. 3 white freedom riders had just finished doing their 40 days, come back to New Orleans. Patricia Smith and Carleen Smith invited them, they lived on General Taylor, to their home for dinner. And while these 3 white guys were walking through the black neighborhood, the police stopped them and asked them what were they doing in that neighborhood. And they said they were going to dinner at a friend's house. And they beat them. So we did a protest at the police station at Tulane and Broad, the headquarters, protesting police brutality. And that was my first arrest.
Now, the NAACP, other questions? Yes.
When I think about the place where young people spend the majority of their time, at least during the week, it's at school.
Can you speak up a little louder?
Yes. So when I think about where young people spend the majority of their time, at least during the week, it's at school. And I have a 2-part question of what do you think are some of the most effective things that a teacher in a classroom and that a school as a whole can do to support and facilitate young people's actions in social change?
Very little of the support or initiative that we got for involvement came from teachers. They were kind of under the gun themselves because if you advocated racial integration, you could lose your job. So I guess indirectly, inspiration that they may have given, some of them were good role models, but there has to be something comes from you. I remember an episode Dodie had that must have been some low moments when I asked myself, why am I here? You know, everybody else seems to be happy and not involved. Why am I out here and making these kinds of sacrifices? It has to be something from you. Now, I think you can educate people, and we certainly were educated about the conditions. But they were people that I was friends with who I tried to get involved and nothing I could say or nothing I could do got them involved. But it has to be something within the individual. And you have to realize, as Dodie mentioned, there were not a lot of us. I mean, there is that mistaken notion that they were always civil rights workers. They were not. There were a handful of people. But you don't need a lot of people to start.
Well, one thing I found out that during that era of time I'm talking about, school was segregated.
Yeah.
So black teachers was much more involved in the movement than they are today.
No.
Well, from where I was from.
Well, not where I was from.
And I was from a little small town called Hammer, and they were.
Okay.
And
there is actually a project on that at the University of Virginia, so they're actually investigating that point, and they're finding that there were black teachers that were.
Well, I mean, there were people, you know, we Pickerton and they keep going and keep up the good work like that.
well, and another thing too, the church was involved in the movement also. Those 2 things.
Well, when you say involved in what way? I mean, again, that's why Mississippi was different.
Well, let me put in.
There weren't that many churches.
There was a lot of kids going to church during that
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Because there's about, what, 3 churches?
Mount Zion, New
Mount
Zion.
Zion, New Zion, and St. James AME.
Yeah. There weren't that many.
And there are certain churches that do that, has that part of their tradition.
Well, the Methodists particularly.
Yeah, and so that,
Some doesn't.
and so in any city, it'll be a specific church or a specific, 2 or 3 churches that, no matter where you are, that has social activism.
But I remember we went to Opelousas to organize that NAACP Youth Council, and we got permission to use a public playground. But they didn't put the lights on. It was dark to see me during the daytime, and I'm talking to people I couldn't see. there weren't too many people who came because, and I understand if you were older and you knew some of the horror stories that a lot of young people did not know, there just weren't that many people who were involved. I mean, there are a lot of people since the movement have invented civil rights records. And that's the ones you see come out on Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Yeah.
But they weren't that many people.
Yeah, but what we've documented, what our students have documented in Riverside and what students have documented here, you know, on Louisiana, you know, in our project, is that you had you had large numbers of students involved when they decided to have like a strike, a boycott, you know, or something like that, a march, you know, a walkout. And you had large numbers of teenagers participating, and then the question was, well, how were they going to be treated once they did that? Are they going to be suspended from school? Are they, you know, are they going to lose scholarships and things like that? So that there are large numbers, and so that overall, you know, when we document what the high school and teenagers do, it's those such as yourselves who participate in campaigns that are organized by groups such as CORE, such as the NAACP, such as SNCC, such as SCLC. But then you also have the protests and stuff that the high school students mostly do themselves, that they organize, the strike that they participated in. There's you know, one of the stories in Louisiana in terms of student organizing is when students hear, for example, that a teacher, a principal, or someone has been arrested or is going to be arrested because of their civil rights activism. Someone that they know, the students, you know, that they look up to, somebody, you know, and so when they say, let's organize a protest because of the arrest of this person, or because this person is a teacher, a principal, someone honored in the community. So then you have large numbers of students. And then the other thing that the students organized in the 60s particularly, was to get Black history courses and teachers, Black teachers, principals in schools, and then they organized to get Black history courses and stuff. And so we documented that in northern Chicago, in New York, in Philadelphia, where students organized and protest, you know, in order to get Black history, or to get Black teachers, you know, principals, and or to protest some kind of outrageous, you know, act that has occurred, and the students themselves organized in order to do this. And so that's what we've been, documenting both.
But it was not any official action of the institution. Because I know we organized the first Black History celebration at UNO. I mean, tremendous. Got a lot of people involved. And then as a result of that, the hiring of Black faculty and the beginning to have Black studies programs and so forth.
Yeah, and then you have the transition that occurs from civil rights to Black power, too, so that you have to recognize that there's a progression in the 60s and stuff. And so the students that came into the movement and into the program, protests and stuff, had different objectives and different goals, and you know, I was in CORE in Philadelphia, but I was in college. But there was a college branch at Penn State. I was at Penn State, and the Ogontz campus had a CORE branch, and I was in that CORE branch. And then we worked with the Philadelphia CORE. Philadelphia CORE was very active, and you know, organizing all kind of tenant strikes and desegregation and programming. So it was very active in the CORE. The CORE chapter on campus worked with the Philadelphia CORE. But then, you know, Black power came along, you know, and so when I was at the main campus at Penn State, then, you know, we organized and stuff in order to get Black studies on the campus, you know, and to get more African American faculty and stuff. And it was coming out of a Black power context because what was happening is that, this actually happened to me, is that when these, in the context of Black power, the kind of nonviolent training and stuff that CORE had been giving, and you know, people had been participating in, people said they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to participate in that. And I actually went to one of those, I actually went to the workshop that CORE, in Philadelphia, organized for nonviolent protests. Never participated.
No, they were not there. I mean, I'm just saying now, I can kind of appreciate that a little bit better now that their heads were in the lion's mouth. They didn't want to close on it. But I know Felton Clark, the president of Southern, was in Africa for the celebration of the independence of Ghana. And he comes back from Africa to put down the movement in Baton Rouge by expelling leaders, barring them from the campus. So you didn't have very much support from
And the students protested, and they closed down. They closed down the Southern and stuff. And
Marvin Robinson was
came.
chairman of Baton Rouge Court at the time.
Yeah.
And then he went on to become the first Southern Regional Director here in New Orleans of CORE.
Yeah.
and they were expelled because they were participating in the protests that were in the community.
Yeah.
The students were participating in the protests that were organized in the black community in Baton Rouge, and then they would get arrested,
Yeah.
and then they say, "Oh no, but once you got arrested, you were expelled." And then the state say, "No, you're not going to expel them. Don't expel." And they would have protests and boycotts.
I know
and
real long.
strikes.
One of the last things you talked about, this fine colored man, Felton Clark. But again,
Yeah.
that was a different time. He had to run the university. I appreciate that a little bit better now. But it wasn't because they were behind the activists. I can tell you that was.
Well, I'm just saying that there's a range. That there were some that were,
But I'm saying most of it was soft. I mean, somebody saying, "Wish you well, good luck," moving very quickly.
Right.
But there was still high school. You had teachers in high school, junior high, that was part of the movement. That I can speak of Birmingham. Birmingham had students, high school students that was arrested.
Yeah. They had junior high school. But it wasn't because the principals and the teachers were leading them. They were trying to hold them back, and they said, "Oh no, we're out of here." So I don't want that mistaken notion that you had this well-organized community effort. All of the leaders were supportive. No, that was not the case.
No. I'm just saying that what the research says is that there's a range, and that we'll get to understand.
There were individual teachers, but they lost their job. Raymond Floyd was at Xavier.
Right.
He lost his job at Xavier. He went to the principal, begged the nun to give him his job back. He wouldn't get his job back.
Well, speaking of losing jobs, the Thompson's father lost his job because he would not make his daughters lead the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
He
I
had
used to
go
bag
out of
groceries
the
at
state
Cuba. I
to
got
get a
fired
job.
because I was involved. I wasn't making but 50 cents an hour.
And Doratha, when she got arrested at Macquarie's, she was working at Hotel Du Hospital and lost her job because she was arrested.
Oh yes, there was a penalty associated.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is that this project, okay, so this project that is, that is going to take place at the University of Virginia, that is underway. It's really going to look at what role, the range of roles that teachers, because they were in a very tenuous situation. They were, and these principals of these high schools and these college presidents, etc. But there is but it seems to be a range. Because we actually published an article, and I can't think of the name of it, but it's the president of Bennett College in
South Carolina.
No, North Carolina, in Greensboro.
North Carolina.
The original Greensboro Senate, that was the original Greensboro, and the Bennett women were in there just like the North Carolina A&T and the North Carolina A&T students who started, and then the Bennett's women at Bennett College, they sport now, and so and I'm trying to think of the name of the press. I can't think of the name of the president, but it was the woman. She helped the students. She bailed them out of jail. The women who were arrested, and and assisted them. And she was, and so that all I'm saying is that, and we published an article on that. So that's why.
No, there was some.
No, I'm just saying that there's a range and all, and all that. Are there any other questions? I think we've gone past our time and stuff.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Hello, this is is a question for Dr. Cassimere. My name is Winston Ho. I'm a graduate student in history at UNO,
Okay.
and I'm also one of the interns here at the Amistad Center. And I've been listening to Arnold Hirsch's interviews with Dutch Morial and Civil Morial, processing those records, which are digitized now if anyone wants to listen to them, and you can read the catalog I wrote for them. But in one of those interviews, Dr. Hirsch asked the former Mayor Morial about whether his education or his background growing up in New Orleans, whether that influenced his civil rights activism. And what Morial said is that he had spent almost his entire educational career in integrated schools, in the Catholic school system, which was most of it, not all of the Catholic schools were, but he wasn't he had white teachers in addition to black teachers.
Dutch Morial? No.
Morial?
Dutch Morial graduated from McDonald 35.
Yes.
That was a black
Talking
man.
about,
Well, it might have been, I'm not sure it's...
Not Dutch.
Okay.
What's somebody
well, it
else?
could have been,
Not in the
Was it
law.
Mark?
Mark.
Mark.
It was
Law, yes.
Dutch guy actually mentioned that he had attended integrated schools because he said that what it instilled in him an expectation of racial equality. And then later on, Hirsch asked the same question of Civil Morial. Then that's when Civil Morial actually talked about her son Mark and about Mark going to integrated schools.
Yeah, Mark went to.
Yeah, Mark was the judge.
But actually, because that was my question, I was going to ask you.
But no, not today. Today is Dutch Morial's brother, Walter, was the assistant principal at my high school. He looked white. In fact, on his driver's license, he was listed as white. But he was the first person really to talk to me about the NAACP. I used to be an office boy, and I heard him use the word I'd never heard before. I'm a race man. I'm a race man. And he mentioned, for example, he had a sister passing for white in California. He said, and my best friend in California is your color. I couldn't bring him to her house. So I'm gonna go see my sister. So I mean, I learned a lot about the movement from people who taught me at Clark, but it was a all black school.
Yeah.
Very, very proud. But it had an impact because
Very good teachers.
very,
Very good teachers.
second to none.
You know, I just had one, I'm really happy to hear about the free research that you're doing on teachers, because there's a wave of that first generation of African American teachers in schools during desegregation that had a whole different experience that they had to deal with. And I have personal family members who went through that, particularly at McDonald 19. But the other comment I wanted to make about Louisiana and Mississippi, it's very, and I think it relates to your comment about school and what young people learn and why many people aren't here. You know, we're the only state right now that doesn't have a civil rights museum or any facility dedicated to its history. We haven't owned it.
Right.
As a matter of fact, you know, when I left here and went up north, if you talk about civil rights, Louisiana never comes up. People don't even know that we were involved. And we've created and crafted a narrative, unfortunately, that's taken this remarkable journey and experience. And it's largely invisible nationally, right? And so I think that, you know, we always joke here at Amistad, I'm the ED here, that, you know, Mississippi has a civil rights museum, you know what I'm saying? Like, how could they have beat us to that point, right?
We get money, though.
You know, they crafted this narrative.
There was an organization, there was money put aside to operate an African American Civil Rights Museum here. And it was going to be at the Murder Banks building on O.C. Haley Boulevard. And the school burned down. It's now the public market or something now. And the money was slowly taken away. But Louisiana was always talking about their hurt for money. If they go to these other southern states that have civil rights museum, You wouldn't believe the lines of people that's there. 2 years ago, I went to Montgomery, Alabama for the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Ride, and they had turned the Greyhound bus terminal there into the Freedom Ride Museum. And
The one in Memphis.
you should have seen all the people there. And there was 2 journalists from Norway or someplace like that. And when they found out that 3 of us, Betty Daniels, Jean Thompson, myself, were from New Orleans, we were like big celebrities. They wanted to know, because everywhere else in the world, just like our music, people know more about our music in Europe, in Japan, everywhere else, but here, they don't appreciate it. And it's just like the museum. That's a money-making thing. Now, I was invited to the opening of the Mississippi Museum of Civil Rights.
It's in Jackson.
The Jackson.
Jackson. I wouldn't go because y'all president was gonna be there. So I would go. In the last 3 years, my sister, my older sister Doratha and my sister Roberta, we're the 3 who were born in Mississippi. We call ourselves the Mississippi 3. So we've been going back. In fact, we were there last month. So we go back to Mississippi. We own property there. My dad left us property in Lexington. My mom left us property in Benton. And so we go back. We still got lots of family there and visit. So we go every year now. But it's a mystery as to why we don't have one. Because if you look at the civil rights movement from Plessis versus Ferguson, and probably beyond that,
Oh, go back even further.
you can go back further than that. And Louisiana has a huge history
Yeah,
of civil rights.
right.
And there's no reason in this world that one shouldn't be here.
Yeah, a little infighting though. I was on the advisory committee, and it wasn't just cut and dry.
Inviting.
Yeah.
Well, I welcome this. Thank you so much for coming. We have to say